Good evening, everyone. My name is Doug Hall. I'm the fire chief for the city of Westminster, and it's a privilege to spend this time with you. I apologize in advance for not being able to be there with you as we recognize and pay tribute to a very fine individual, retired Chief of Police Lee Birk. Lee was a colleague, Lee was a fellow department head, and most importantly, Lee was a friend. And I sat here thinking about all of the great times that we experienced throughout our entire career. I had the very fortunate experience of knowing Lee throughout my entire career. And, excuse me? Oh, really? Well, hell, that changes everything. Oh. Good evening, everyone. My name is Doug Hall, and I'm the fire chief for the city of Westminster. It is a privilege to be a part of the program tonight as we recognize the retirement of Chief of Police Lee Birk. Lee, congratulations. Great career. As you know, Lee, we've known each other for my entire career. You were here for 40 plus years, and I'm rapidly approaching that, but I had the opportunity to know and work with you for my entire career. And I just want to say how much it means to me to have this time to where I can share with you some of my thoughts about the times that we spent together in your career as a professional law enforcement officer. In fact, there's a lot of things that I think is important that people understand about Lee Birk. Lee is the consummate professional. Lee cared about the city of Westminster more than anyone that I know. He spent his entire career here as a professional law enforcement officer. He cared deeply for his personnel. And Lee embodied what a professional law enforcement officer should be about. Starting early in his career when Westminster was a small city along the Front Range, Lee made the decision to commit through his entire career to the city of Westminster. And like so many of us in public safety and in other public sector careers, there's a career path that people chose to follow. And Lee was one of those that chose to promote as the opportunities presented himself to give back to the organization, to give back to the community. And throughout the years, and particularly in the latter part of Lee's tenure as chief of police, shortly after I was appointed fire chief, we had the wonderful opportunity to spend time together, to talk about our experiences and to share knowledge and our experiences with each other. And I really appreciate the mentorship and the advice that I received from Lee over the years. You know, there's a lot of people that would question why someone would want to go into law enforcement. If you know Lee as well as I do, you know why law enforcement was the perfect career opportunity for Lee Birk, a person of sincere faith, a person of devout commitment, and a person that really cared about people. And we often tease our law enforcement brothers and sisters about going over to the dark side, but it is meant in humor. And we all choose a path that we think that will serve us best as we serve our communities. And I am thankful, having been a resident of this community for a number of years and raised a family here, that Lee Birk served in the community that I resided in as the chief of police. And a lot of things from a leadership aspect, a lot of things from a management aspect, Lee was able to pass on to many people within his organization. And Lee got an early start with his career and promoted up through the ranks initially from the first promotional opportunity as sergeant and up through lieutenant and commander and captain, deputy chief, and then chief of police. But, you know, it all starts with that entrance exam. And oftentimes you will hear law enforcement. And truthfully, I've heard Lee say occasionally, he wished sometimes he had chosen a career in the fire service. And I would often respond that, yeah, Lee, if you'd have scored 5 points higher, you could have been a firefighter. That's not really the case. Let me share this with you. I was able to acquire Lee's entrance exam, the police officer recruit testing results from the Law Enforcement Civil Service Testing Board. And what we see here are the results of Lee's initial examination. And hopefully you can see that a couple of errors were made. And Lee will be the first one to tell you that he wasn't perfect. I can assure you, he's far from perfect. In fact, it would take a little bit more than that 5 points that I indicated for him to have become a firefighter. Lee's test, as the results show, were 88.6. You just hope and wonder that that approximate 12% that he missed wasn't something crucial in terms of becoming a true bona fide law enforcement officer. But that's the way it was back then. And Lee certainly was able to make amends from that early testing process and became a superior performing officer throughout his early career, and subsequently turned into an absolutely fine police officer and supervisor. And ultimately, as we're bearing witness here tonight, finished out his career as the chief of police, a true honor for anyone in the law enforcement profession. But the true measure of a leader is the legacy that they leave behind. And Lee's legacy and the legacy that he left behind is one for others to emulate. And one of the things that Lee has stated over time is the privilege that he had early in his career as a chief of police to serve as a judge when a new donut shop opened within the city. And, you know, law enforcement gets beat up pretty good about donuts. And quite frankly, I think it's a little bit unfair. But, you know, there's valid reasons why law enforcement are associated with donuts. And you know, you just have to take a step back and realize that, you know, you can still talk on the radio with one hand while you're eating a donut. You can drive a vehicle with one hand while you're eating a donut. There's a lot of things that police officers can do to perform their job that really only requires one hand. The other hand, of course, oftentimes holding a donut. But I don't want to get down into the weeds on that, and I don't want to disparage Lee's reputation over the use of donuts. However, one of the things that I think is critical in understanding the value of Lee Birk is his sincere belief and support in officer safety. And there's nothing more crucial than the safety of your personnel. And Lee, early in his career, recognized the true value of America's donuts as it relates to officer survival and officer safety. Let me give you a perfect example. A lot of times people refer to police officers as cops. And the history of that basically is that cops is short for copper. And back in the early historical times, the original badges were formulated from the metal copper. And so they developed this nickname of being a copper. That got shortened down to cops. But we in the public safety sector, like so many industries, particularly law enforcement and the fire service, we use a lot of acronyms. Lee will tell you, the word COPS, while many perceive it to be short for copper, really stands for chocolate or powdered sugar. That's what COPS really stands for. But it's more serious than that. And this is the time that I want to really drive home this serious concern that Lee had about officer survival and officer safety. Let's take, for instance, the powdered sugar and the chocolate donut. Lee recognized early on the value of this as an officer safety tool. Take the powdered sugar donut. Like all donuts, it has a hole in the center. Well, one of the things that officers have to continually be aware of is how they approach a particular incident. And Lee was able to devise a technique utilizing the ordinary donut to help as a tool for officer safety. So one of the things that he encouraged his officers to do when they were approaching the scene was to look through the center of that donut. If they could not see the entire incident through the center of that donut, they were too close. They needed to back off a little bit and get some distance between them and what was presenting some risk to them. So they were able to gauge the distance, the safe distance that they needed to be. Now, of the two donuts, powdered sugar and chocolate, Lee's favorite was powdered sugar. Because as you're holding the donut up and the wind's blowing towards you, if the sugar blows into your face, that tells you you're in the wrong location. So whatever, like in a hazardous material incident or something like that, the smoke from a fire, it would be blowing towards the officer, and they knew that if they held the donut up, particularly a powdered sugar donut, and it blew back on them, time to reposition yourself. And then the other nice thing that this represented is the fact that it's round. And Lee was able to put it on the highway, on the street. And if the donut rolled back towards you, that demonstrated that you were below grade from whatever the incident was. And whether it was hazardous materials or some other substance that might cause harm to an officer, that would tell the officer they needed to reposition and find a new geographic location that was either level or higher than the particular incident. So that's just another example of Lee's commitment to officer safety, officer survival. And fact of the matter is, sometimes these incidents, like at a SWAT team incident or barricaded gunman type of a scenario, it also provided then an opportunity for the officers to have a little snack to get them through the shift, because sometimes those scenes get locked down and it's difficult logistically to get them the necessary fluids and food that they need to have. But here's what I really want to say in all seriousness. Lee, it was an absolute privilege to serve as a firefighter alongside you as a police officer. I can't tell you what it meant to me to serve as the City of Westminster's fire chief alongside you while you were performing the duties of a chief of police. It has been truly an honor to serve with you. I consider you a friend, and I know that the new chief of police, Tim, has some big shoes to fill. My God, people, look at Lee. For a man of his height, he's got huge feet. I mean, anyway. Lee, thank you. It's been a privilege to have served with you. This is your night. Be proud of the work that you've done. You've left a great legacy for others to follow, and I wish you the best moving forward. Thank you.